Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Yoga in My School podcast. My name is Donna Freeman. I am the host of the podcast and founder of Yoga in My School. And I just am so pleased today because I get to connect with a longtime friend who is, as I was telling her just before we connected and went live for the recording, that she's been on my list for at least 2 years to connect with. And because she's just amazing. She comes with such a wealth of information. I think we met back in her holy yoga days and then she got into next generation yoga. And I don't know, it might have even been before that. Like, we've known each other for a long time, and she has been truly just a gem in my life. And I know she will be in yours. But today we're chatting with Sarah Henderson, and we're talking about yoga for individuals with intellectual and developmental delays and disabilities, which is such a great topic because there is so little information on this topic. So like, if you're thinking of working with, teens and adults that fall into this category, you will want to listen today because Sarah is your girl. She has, she's invested emotionally, has a long history with her family. We're going to get into all of that. And then, like, from a professional point of view, you cannot get better than Sarah Henderson on this topic. So welcome to the podcast, Sarah.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here.
So can you tell our listeners, because I know you, but can you tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and how you came to be doing the work that you're currently doing?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Sarah Henderson. My pronouns are she and her, and I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. I was born in Colorado. I'm the oldest of three children, and my little sister has Down syndrome. So she was born when I was 4. And that sort of set the trajectory for my life in so many ways. I grew up watching my sister have speech therapy and occupational therapy and physical therapy in our home. And she started attending a school for kids with disabilities when she was like 1.5. And so, like, it just became part of my life in a very everyday kind of way. Both of my parents ended up working in disability services, so then it was even more so. And then when I graduated from college, I too ended up going into disability services, and I worked in a variety of different places in nonprofit organizations that were supporting people with disabilities and families. And I landed one job at an inclusive preschool. So, like, I always loved kids, but I ended up getting a job at this inclusive preschool. It was half kids with disabilities and half kids without. And I got to run a family support center where there were resources and things that, like, we had puppets and books and developmentally appropriate toys. And kids could come in there with their parents and connect. And I got to run a support group for parents of kids who had different kind of diagnoses going on. And it was really, really cool. From there, I ended up working for our local early intervention organization, which helps children 0 to 3 who are having either developmental delays or maybe are born with something like Down syndrome or are premature. And that was just a really amazing job to be able to walk alongside families as they were going through this and being able to help them see, also, like, the reality of what's going on with their child, but also the potential and the possibility. And because I had so much experience with my sister, I often got paired with families who had kids with Down syndrome. And so then I started having kids of my own, and I moved to being a stay-at-home mom. It was kind of a lot to be around babies all day and babies all night. And it was then that I went to yoga school, and thinking that I was just having this radical shift. And our mutual friend Rachel Glowacki was one of my trainers, and we got to know each other a little bit. And she was like, "Hey, do you want to learn about kids yoga?" And I was like, "Well, sure, yeah. Like, I love kids. You're fun." And so I got into kids yoga with Rachel. And then a couple of years later, I just started asking the question, where are the people with disabilities? And like you said, um, there wasn't a lot happening. So this is back in like 2013, 2014. And it just sort of lit this fire in me where I started to explore, how can we make yoga, the yoga studio, the yoga mat, a place where everybody can come, because it seemed possible to me. And that the same things that you and I need from our yoga practice as kids yoga teachers, we know that it's good for kids. And I think, like it just was like, I think this would be good for a lot of people. So that's sort of started my journey. um, and yeah, and that's been my passion ever since.
Fantastic. Yeah. So a lot of people try and, or they ask me, it's like, okay, what are the overarching principles when you're teaching kids yoga and, that type of thing. It's like, okay, this is what you want to keep in mind. Like all the little details will fall into place
Yeah.
because every class and every individual will be unique. And I think that is even more so when you're working with individuals who have disabilities and delays and all that type of thing. So,
Yeah.
there's that meme that goes around when you've met one person with autism, remember you've met one person with autism.
Yeah.
Right? And that's very much the case that I've found when I've worked with various populations. It's like, one person with Down syndrome is one person with Down syndrome. It's going to be completely different with every individual.
Yeah.
Well, when you're thinking of that, what are your overall overriding guiding principles when you're teaching individuals with cognitive difficulties?
Well, I think that this would be something that I would say about all kids in general, but I want to provide an experience that helps them fall in love with the practice. And I think that this could go for kids as well as adults with developmental disabilities, is that I think it's really important that we leave room for there to be that love match, and that when we try to control things and it has to be like this and impose all these rules and barriers around it, like you might in certain kinds of adult yoga, I think we can lose people. And and I think that that's unfortunate, because I think that everyone should be able to find their way in. And these kids don't have the option of like, hey, I might like a yin class, or I might be restorative, or I really like power flow, like we do. Like we can look at the schedule on the yoga studio and say, this is what I'm in the mood for, or this is what I really like. Um, and kids and people with disabilities, they just get the yoga class. And so how do we provide options within that meet people where they're at, and address kind of what their nervous system needs, because it might be different, because you might really like power yoga, but like yin is my thing, and we get to have our nervous system's needs met in that way. So it's a challenge, but I think we have the capacity. Like I believe in us. We can rise to the challenge.
Well, and I love that. I love that you're like, yeah, it's going to have to be different. And even what you're offering in the same class,
Yes.
it's going to have to, there's that opportunity for choice and just checking in again and again with people. Like there's so many things to consider. And I think that the teachers of these classes have to be really gifted at being able to allow students to own their own practice.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know. I don't know how you feel. You do you.
Yeah.
And be okay with that, right? Instead of everyone is going to do sun salutations exactly the same way. I'm like, well, no, that's not going to happen today.
Well, let's take that for an example and kind of like workshop that a little bit. Like, so say as a teacher, I think it's super important for you as a teacher to go in with a plan to teach your students, but use the plan to teach your students. Don't use your students to teach your plan. All right. So let's say I've got sun salutations on my list, and some of my students can do the simple kids version sun salutation. That's great. But let's say I've got some other kids let's say I've got somebody who doesn't like to stay on their mat, who who needs a lot more of that sensory input, like maybe I bring a sunshine face on a stick and I say, what you're going to do, or here's an option for you, is you travel the sun around our circle. So while we're doing our sun salutations, you take the sun and you're going to make that rotation around us, right? Like the earth goes around the sun, you're going to take the sun around us. And then let's say that there's someone else who's got limited mobility, and all that they've got maybe is finger wiggling. So the rays of the sun, when we draw the sun, it's kind of squiggly. Why don't you give us the warmth from the sun? Maybe even with your bright smile, and you wiggle your fingers and you fill the room with sunlight. Does that seem like a good idea for you? So then you're teaching the kids who benefit from the traditional kids version sun salutation. You're giving your wiggle worm something to do that is also tied into the sun, and then you're taking your person with limited mobility and still making them a part. Like we're all bringing the sunshine right now. So that's like, those are some things that I would think of off the top of my head. I'm looking at sun salutation, but I've got these other variant, in kind of my kiddos, abilities, preferences, whatever that is. How do we create a cohesive whole in our class? That isn't, I'm a big believer in the like corner where you've got your mandalas and your, breathing ball and all of that. Like that's a great option, but that doesn't have to be our only option, you know?
Yes, and I love how you're kind of redirecting. You're leaning into what people are bringing with their
Yeah.
abilities and their emotional state and their cognitive state. It's like, okay, where are you at? What is your natural tendency to do? And can I lean into that and leverage it in a way that is really useful to not just you as an individual, but also to the group, because it is a group class.
Yeah.
And so we're all part and parcel here, and we're all contributing. And even if you're having a really bad day and you just want to watch the sunshine,
Yep.
I appreciate watching the sunshine. It's like,
Yeah. Well, and you could even do something fun. Like if somebody said like, I just want to watch, I would say like, oh, that's awesome. We better put sunscreen on then. If you're just going to lay in the sun today, we better put some sunscreen on. Okay, everybody, let's put our sunscreen on. And so then you're like, you're going with the flow of what the student is saying, and then giving them something, and then they can just sit there while everybody else does it because they've got their sunscreen on.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right. That brings me to I think it's one of my favorite phrases that I heard you say, but I've heard you say, presence is participation. And I love it. I was just like, oh, yeah, because that's how I feel. I'm like, you show up, you're good. And you get to participate just by showing up on your mat, whatever that might look like.
Yeah.
And but can you explain how teachers, because sometimes that's a very difficult, or that's a very different approach to participation, means that you're involved.
Yeah.
Um, how do we adjust as teachers to an environment where everyone isn't going to participate in the same way?
Yeah. I think that it's interesting to think about if you're teaching in a school setting where there is a lot of requested compliance, or if you're teaching in a yoga studio or at a camp or something like that. um, I think that either way, yoga is something that we are doing that it's simultaneously stimulating and calming. And if you have things going on in your body mind relationship that are already creating um, kind of a higher dialogue or frequency of those things, that some of what a neurotypical person might find um, energizing or soothing, like it just the wavelengths might just be higher. And so some of the things that we think are good can be too much for some people with different kinds of it's like language sometimes fails, but like people who are somewhat different than the typical child. And so recognizing that sometimes not doing what you're asking isn't a unwillingness or not being compliant. It's really protecting their own peace. And so sometimes I think people just like to listen. They like to listen to the sound and the rhythm of what's happening. They might want to watch. They might be having pain in their body that day, and the movement wouldn't feel good. And I think that as yoga teachers, we are trying to create an awareness for people to have their body mind relationship, um, cohesive, and also to activate that sense of self-empowerment so that we can make choices, and I'm also really passionate about, um, trauma-informed yoga, the accessible yoga mindset that we get to be the boss of our own bodies, right? And I think that if it's important that if we're teaching children, we're starting to lay the foundation for that. Not like, okay, this you have to do what the yoga teacher tells you, because that can be problematic when you get older, you know?
Yes.
And
It can be
as,
problematic at any age, but yes,
yeah,
if we are right, and as you say, the requested compliance or the
yep,
expected compliance, and like you say, they individuals may not have the words to be able to communicate with you what is going on in their experience. So
yeah,
instead of assuming that it is rebellion or that they're doing it just to piss you off,
right.
it's like, huh, that's interesting. Maybe what's going on there and how can I work with that? And the other thing is, I've had so many students over the years watch,
Yep,
just watch.
yep,
And then like I'll hear later from a parent or an aide or something like that. And I'm like, yeah, they went and did that whole class at
yep,
home. Or
yep,
I saw them practicing that breath technique later
yep,
and like all that kind of stuff. And so I know my oldest is a watcher.
yep,
And when he was very young, it was very difficult to get him to join into group activities. Like it took forever. I remember paying for swim lessons once, and he sat on the side of the pool all, well,
mm,
7 of the 8 weeks.
yeah,
And I was just like, you were driving me nuts. But he needed to watch.
yep,
And then, like in the last week, he finally got in the pool, and I was like, couldn't you done that earlier? But that was his learning process.
yeah,
Frustrating as all get out for me as a parent, but it was such a beautiful example. Like, looking back, like in the moment, I was just like, wow, how can I get this kid in the pool and do all this stuff? And I was like, no, just let him do it at his pace.
hmm yeah. It he needed to do what he needed to do to feel safe in the environment, and that very well is probably part of what's going on with your watchers and your listeners too, is that they need to get to a place where they feel safe. Um, and and another thing that what when you were talking about reminded me that if someone is there, they are breathing, and breathing is part of the yoga practice, and we're breathing together. And I think sometimes, it's understandable because I think our culture has taught us this way, but we confuse yoga with asana. We confuse yoga with poses. And there's much more to yoga than just poses. Though for some people, that's a really important part of their yoga practice, right? But we do have the breath. We do have the awareness. We do have that tuning in to our essential nature, right? And so those are things, I think this is important whether you're teaching kids or people with disabilities or kids with disabilities, is expanding what you think about as yoga. And so like in some of my classes, sometimes poses are a much smaller part of what we do. We take a lot of time for conversation, like how are you doing, check in. We would call some of that social emotional learning, but I also think about that as relationship building, because if you trust me and you think I care about you, because I do, but like if you think I care about you, you are probably going to be more receptive to my suggestions. And and I see a lot of times a win, like if there's a new person in the program, they don't want to do yoga, they don't, like that's not their thing for whatever reason. If I keep trying to build a relationship with them, oftentimes eventually they come around. I do have one guy, like yoga's not his thing, and one day I said, Mario, would you like to try something? And he's like, yoga, no. And I said, okay, yoga, no. Like, thank you for letting me know. um and like I honor his choice of yoga, no, and and that's okay. But we sing a lot of songs. We have a lot of conversations. I will sometimes read stories or books that can broaden a conversation around some of the things that we're learning. And we'll take time with props, and do that kind of stuff. We bring in somatic exercises. We call it yoga dancing, where everyone just gets to move, and then we take turns leading. Sometimes we'll do some like fitness stuff, jumping jacks or boxing, tai chi moves, and all of that is just expanding this idea of, or maybe not expanding, maybe it's tapping into what yoga really is, that it's not just poses, and that we don't have to be slaves to these yoga positions.
Yeah, I find that the body sensing yoga, just kind of moving in a way, and and giving, I'll give suggestions when I lead that. It's like, hey, I don't know, move your arms, maybe you're in the waves, like
Yeah.
maybe you're doing this, and maybe your hands go up high. It's like, I don't know, I'm just going to toss out ideas of how you
Yeah.
might want to move, and then it's like, oh, look at Charlie over here, he's doing an amazing job, and Julia, wow, that's really clever, I love that, right? And so, like, you're allowing people to find expression in movement. And I think you're right. I think that is, really, it's not necessarily expanding it, but I often will call it yoga outside of the box.
Yeah.
It's like, but what's the big umbrella of yoga, not our little definition of what we think it is.
Right. And you can even apply that to traditional yoga poses. So like, say that you've got someone who is so your plan is to do boat pose, let's say. So the kids that can do boat pose, they can do the boat pose, but then you can say, like, all right, well, some of you might want to make a boat with your hands, and you can make a little boat with your hands. And then someone else might want to make the sound of the water, or like, does anybody just want to float in the waves, and you can just move your boat. Like, all of those can be boat, right? And some people might be doing navasana, but everybody can do the boat, right?
Yeah, exactly. And often, because I teach a lot of seniors and little kids.
Oh, it's so, teaching seniors and teaching children is very much the same.
Right. And as you say, it's all about the relationship. It's all about creating this connection, which is yoga. And that social connection is a big part of it. And I personally, like, if you're coming to my class, I'm going to ask you questions.
Yeah.
And some people, the typical adult, has a really tough time with that. It takes them a couple of weeks before they realize that I actually expect answers.
Yeah.
But I'm going to ask you questions about how we doing, like, how anybody's thighs burning in this pose, like, where are we at this morning, or this evening, or what's going on with you, how did that feel, and like all that kind of thing. And so my classes are very talkative, like definitely more so than the typical yoga teachers
Yeah.
classes. And
Yeah.
some people don't like that. They go to yoga for the silence. And I'm like, I want to talk to you. I want to know about you. I want to know who you are and what interests you,
Yeah.
and what resonates with you. And I think that's a great approach whenever you're teaching anyone. It's like, come be part of something that's really cool.
Well, yeah, and I'm thinking, if we're talking about adults with disabilities or adults without disabilities or seniors, like, so many of us that are in that adult age range, we were brought up in a time where our emotions weren't super tolerated. We weren't taught to explore what we're feeling or own what we're feeling. And I think sometimes, people will say, "How are you?" And I'm like, "I have no idea." And it's through yoga that I've been able to kind of understand more of what I'm feeling and accessing that. And I think about that a lot when I'm teaching my adults with developmental disabilities, is that so many times their expressions of emotion gets labeled as bad behavior. And I recently was watching Brene Brown's new show, and she said that there are three acceptable emotions for adults: mad, sad, and
I'm
happy.
happy.
And she's like, but we've got a whole bunch more. And so I think I love what you're saying, because I think that social emotional learning needs to happen for a lot of us, not just children. Like, I think a lot of adults probably have less clues about how they actually feel, that doesn't need to go into one of those three buckets of mad, sad, or glad.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. All right. So there's a couple of brass tacks, kind of really fundamental things. What would be your go-to props that you're just like, okay, I'm teaching a class, I have to make sure I grab that. Or activities that you would like always work into the framework of your class.
Yeah, okay. So this is something that I kind of developed over, COVID. For a long time I've used yoga cards, which look like, it's often got a picture or a drawing of a person doing the yoga pose, and some of them might have another reference image, but I've started using just like print out color pictures that are full size of actual objects. So I'm holding up a picture of a jellyfish, for Donna, and I have, a binder full of these different things, and some of them are yoga poses. Um, like I have a picture of the boat, but here's one that's an owl that we do for like a spinal twist. We turn, like, we put our wings on one side, and then we turn our head the other side, and we say hoo hoo. And I have found that having these kind of flashcards versus my yoga flashcards, like, they were already following my body shape, but bringing the actual picture of actual objects, or actual creatures, has helped them learn the poses in a way that the marketed yoga cards does not. And that it's so easy. I go on like Canva or PicMonkey and go to the stock photos, and I just print them out, and it's been absolutely amazing. And so that is something, is using a visual reference to be able to add to your physical reference of the posture and your description of what we're doing. So that's one thing. I always have a meditation, like a glitter meditation jar with me, because I don't care how old you are. Again, I used to bring these into my senior citizens classes, and like, everyone likes looking at a glitter meditation jar. And if you don't know how to make them, there are a million recipes on the internet. They're super easy, but this is something that you can use in your lesson plans. If you're doing something on stars, we can do stargazing. For St. Patrick's Day, I have a gold one, and this was our pot of gold. But if there's somebody that's having a sad day or a mad day, this is something that they can sit with, they can hold. It is very calming. And I know a lot of classrooms have this in their calm down corner, where you can shake the glitter jar. So that's something. And I had another thought, and it flew out of my mind, so I might have to come back to that. But those are things that I always have, that I think are really important, that can help frame the class, in a way. So
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you're using real pictures. I've done that for years. I'm like, you got a printer, you got a laminator, you're good to go.
yeah, yeah,
Right. And you just put yours, if people aren't watching the video, Sarah's were just in a protective sleeve, and
yeah,
I've done that as well. And so, but like you say, you have a binder. I have a filing cabinet with all of my lesson plans and all of my set card decks,
yeah,
that I've printed out over the years of everything to do with the beach, and they're all pictures of things at the beach. Everything to do with, I have a class, Oh Canada class, because welcome to Canada. And so it's all animals, Canadian animals, and or icons that you would see in Canada. So
Yeah.
like, the tower in Niagara Falls, and like all this kind of stuff, the big tree, like there's all kinds of, you get the idea. And so these are actual pictures, and then we do a pose inspired by the picture.
Yeah.
And it really opens it up to, I don't know, what do you think? Like if you're going to be a beaver, because I don't know about you, but there's no beaver asana.
Right.
But if you're going to, a beaver is a Canadian animal, and what would it look like?
Right.
And it's amazing what people come up with. And then you're opening it up to their creativity and their interpretation.
Yes.
And like, fantastic.
Yeah. And that is, we're entering the yoga river when we do that, because all yoga poses were inspired and made up by somebody. So somebody came along and made the shape of what we know as the tree pose, and that was them looking at something that inspired them, and they made a shape. So why not make a beaver pose? And that, I remembered what I was thinking before that I bring that's not an object. So I think the thing that is super important is to have some consistency. So our opening and our closings are the same every time. And I think that just gives us some boundary around our practice. And so that it's not, they know what to expect when we do our yoga warm up and our head to toe stretches at the beginning, and then we'll mix it up, whatever the lesson plan is in the end. And then we always do our same closing with a song, and we may you be happy, may you be healthy, may you live in peace. And so I think that is really important to create that sense of belonging and like, I am safe here. So that's another thing.
Yeah. Routine and ritual, like it really helps provide framework. And as you say, I'm safe. I know what to expect. I know when class is beginning because it's going to sound and look and feel like this. And I know when class is ending because it's going to sound and look and feel like that.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And it's this package that you put together. And yes, there's lots of variety in the middle, but the packaging, that routine is so vital for us all to know what, and heaven forbid that we mess with that. Once it's set, it's set. You have to decide.
Yeah. And a lot of folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities really thrive on routine. And, like my sister, like if you tell her you are picking her up at 5:00 and it is 5:04, like there's going to be a problem, like if you said you were coming at 5. And so I think that when we can not become rigid, but when we can provide that support, I think that is, again, part of that relationship, part of that knowing, part of that, like, I see you and I respect you.
It also makes you a trustworthy person, right?
Yeah.
When you set expectations and you fulfill them time after time, then you are a trustworthy person. And again, that all comes back to that safe space. And then only in a safe space, we can actually delve into who we are and what we're feeling, and being vulnerable with that and being able to express that.
Yeah. And in the same way, when you try something and they don't like it, like I had a picture of a snake, and I have a couple of groups that they did not like my snake picture. Like they do not. And so like, okay, like I think wiggling like a snake is a really good way to activate some spinal mobility, but they did not agree with me. And so we took the snake out of the rotation, and we can move like a piece of cooked spaghetti instead. And we're getting the same spinal mobility, but they don't like my snake. So, all right, snake.
Thank you for the feedback.
Goes back into the binder.
Yeah. And thank you for the feedback. I appreciate that. Yeah. I don't know everything. I need the goods and I need the bads, and I need to be able to adjust and reflect as a teacher of what's working and what's not.
Right. Well, and I think, haven't we all been in a yoga class where the teacher is doing yoga performance and no one in the class can actually do what the teacher's doing, and so then everyone's just kind of standing there feeling like a failure, that that doesn't feel good to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
All
yeah.
right. Now you have an upcoming training that looks
Yeah.
absolutely amazing. Can you tell us a little bit about this event?
Yeah, thank you. I am partnering with School, Sarah Harrington, and we are teaching a course that's yoga for disabilities and differences or yoga and mindfulness in the classroom. And so we are going to be talking a lot about these different strategies that we can use. We'll also be touching on chair yoga, and getting into how do you plan a whole lesson plan with these options kind of baked into them. We'll be talking about different kinds of disabilities that you might encounter and what you might need to know about different kinds of things. We'll be learning different strategies that have worked. We'll talk about some things that I've tried that haven't worked. And then we'll even talk about some things like anxiety and ADHD, some of more of those neurodiverse kind of topics that we are starting to identify more. And then like how do we support kids like that as well? So it's gonna happen over a couple of weekends, so we've got time to metabolize in between, and I'm looking forward to partnering with Sarah on that.
Yeah, she's a very talented lady. So it's the Sarah and Sarah show.
Yes, the Sarah H and Sarah H.
That's fantastic. All right.
Confusing it all.
So where can people find you? Where can they go to learn more about the event?
Yeah, okay, so the registration is on the Schooled website, which is om-schooled.com. And it's also on my website, which is yogaincludesme.com. Under the events tab, you can get to Sarah's website there. And then I am on Instagram and Facebook at Sarah Henderson Yoga. Sarah has an H and Henderson has an H, so there's two H's there. But that's where folks can find me and see what I'm up to in the yoga world. And I'm planning on doing a training in the fall for strictly about adults with developmental disabilities, because I think that that's important. It's not just teaching overgrown children. There's how do we reach adults in a developmentally appropriate way for their adulthood, but also reaching them in a way that connects to the heart. So yeah.
Fantastic. Great, because I know a few people who have asked me about an adult training for individuals with developmental disabilities, and I'm just like, I don't know. And now I do. And so fantastic. Thank you. Good. I will send people your way, and again continue to sing your praises because I think you're just
thank you so much, Donna. It's really fun to talk with you.
Well, it has been a delight. I appreciate your time, your expertise, and I think most of all, I really appreciate your heart.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm just grateful that I gotten to chat with you and to share with your listeners.
Well, thank you very much. Everybody, thank you for listening and or watching. If this topic has inspired you, if it has connected with you, if somebody has come to mind during our conversation, please share. And likes and all those little things, it makes such a huge difference. It attracts more people to the podcast and gets this message out there that yoga is for everyone. And we as teachers can and are happy to accommodate and to make it really creative. And we're up to that challenge, and we're excited about it. So thank you very much for listening. And until next time, have a great day.
Thank you.